step, please.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Today on Full Measure, our interview with President Trump on a week when tax reform was a hot topic.
Who is it that's fighting for a piece of this tax reform, maybe fighting against the interests of ordinary Americans?
The swamp, Sharyl, it's the swamp.
But we also wanted to ask him about Russia.
Have you been told to expect to be questioned by the special counsel?
No, nobody's told me.
And we asked about terrorism.
Do you think Americans are safer today than they were a year ago, 2 years ago?
I think we are.
And about the biggest threat facing America.
On North Korea, in a recent poll, 50% of Americans said it's somewhat likely that North Korea will use a nuclear weapon to attack America. Do you agree? Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. This week, President Trump agreed to speak with us about a topic front and center in the lives of many Americans: taxes. Republicans just unveiled their new plan to update and simplify the U.S. tax code. But we also had questions on other topics, on immigration and terrorism. And what about the latest developments on Russia and both Democrat and Republican campaign shenanigans? That's where we begin. On Russia, nobody admitted it during the campaign, but we now know it was the Hillary Clinton campaign that funded that so-called dossier that had all the negative information that was unproven about you, apparently in an attempt to affect the election. It was given to the FBI. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's terrible. I think it's despicable. The amount of money that I hear being thrown around is ridiculous. Somebody said that this guy Steele that wrote it, and we'll figure that out eventually, that he paid money to the Russians. And frankly, if that was, in fact, Russia involved, they don't like me very much, just the opposite of what people are saying. And, you know, I have said over the last period of time, the last person they want is me, because I want strong military, which I've proven in many ways, and that was part of my campaign. And I also want low oil prices and lots of oil, which is not good for Russia. So I would think I would be the last one. But when you look at that horrible dossier, which is a total phony, fake deal, like so much of the news that I read, when you look at that and take a look at what's gone on with that and the kind of money we're talking about, it is a disgrace.
The origins of the dossier supposedly is conservative funding. What does that tell you?
Well, I heard the other day that it might be, and then I heard that basically they started something, but the Democrats really took it up and started it. And then the question is, did the FBI get involved with it? And did the FBI use it? Because if they did, that's a real problem for them. So we'll find out, but I have a feeling that the Democrats started it. I'm sure the conservatives started something else, but it was a much more mellow situation. And they did say they didn't hire Steele and the phony people that worked on it.
Do you think Mueller is doing a good job?
Well, we're going to see. Look, all I can say is that I have nothing to do with Russian collusion. Nothing whatsoever, and everybody knows it. And nobody really has even been able to find, you know, with all of these committee meetings, they walk out, even the other side, they say, well, there's been no collusion yet, but we continue to look. I've been watching this for, how long has it been, a year? It's very unfair. It's very bad for our country. But with all of the work that the Democrats are trying to do to obstruct and to, you know, false charges, every time I see them walking out, they're saying, even Dianne Feinstein, that no collusion. And I respect her for saying it, I'll be honest with you. No collusion. But they're at these meetings and they go through documents and there is no collusion. Russia wouldn't help me. And I think the last one Russia would want to be president is me, because of my attitude on oil and because of my attitude on the military and strength.
Do you think you would ever consider trying to have Mueller removed, or have you pledged to just stay out of that?
Well, I hope he's treating everything fairly, and if he is, I'm going to be very happy, because when you talk about innocent, I am truly not involved in any form of collusion with Russia, believe me. That's the last thing I can think of to be involved in.
Who was it, do you remember, who convinced you to take Paul Manafort on as your campaign manager?
Well, it was a friend of mine who was a businessman, very successful businessman and a good person. And, you know, Paul was not there very long. What people don't mention, Paul was not there for a very long period of time.
What was it that convinced you that he had to be let go?
Well, I think we found out something about he may be involved with certain nations, and I don't even know exactly what it was in particular. But there was a point at which we just felt Paul would be better off, because we don't want to have any potential conflicts. And if there was a conflict, I don't want to be involved in any conflicts, even though it was, I could have kept him longer. I don't think anybody would have complained. But we don't want to have any potential conflicts of interest at all.
Have you questioned why the businessman who brought you his name, do you want to say who that is?
Well, I don't want to get him involved. He's a private person.
Have you questioned why he brought him to the campaign, or you think that was just happened?
Look, people don't realize Paul Manafort worked for Ronald Reagan. He worked for Bob Dole. I think the firm was involved with many people. I don't have to mention names, but I heard they were involved with John McCain, who's an honorable guy. They were involved with many people. I mean, many, many people. I certainly wasn't the first. This was a firm that was well known in Washington for years and represented many, many big people, politically speaking, and Ronald Reagan being number one. So the reputation, I always felt, was very good, and I had him for a very short period of time. You know, he was only in there for a very finite period of time. But, you know, I feel badly for him, because I always found him to be really a very nice person.
Last question on this topic. Have you been told to expect to be questioned by the special counsel? Are you prepared for that?
Nobody's told me. As far as I'm concerned, I haven't been told that we're under investigation. I'm not under investigation. You know, when it comes to Russia collusion, they're looking at the wrong person, absolutely the wrong person. So I don't even, to the best of my knowledge, my lawyers told me I'm not even under investigation. I have not been told that at all, no.
On terrorism, you've just called for an end to the diversity lottery visa that allowed Saifullah Saipov into the U.S. What would replace it? What's your idea in a nutshell? Well,
I don't think replace it. I think that the whole element, are you talking about the lottery system? Yes. It's a ridiculous thing. We take like lottery, like who knows who they put in there? And I guarantee you, these countries, they don't put their finest in the lottery system. They put people, probably, in many cases, that they don't want. Why is this country doing it? The lottery system has to end. And what we want, Sharyl, and we want it very badly, and we want it, you know, as far as immigration is concerned, we've been treated so badly, and we've handled immigration prior to me, because we have been very tough on it, but we've handled immigration in the United States so poorly. We want a merit-based system.
When it comes to Islamic extremist terrorism, do you think Americans are safer today than they were a year ago, 2 years ago?
I think we are. I think that we have a much tougher vetting process. I call it extreme vetting. We are very strong with our vetting, but people can slip through. But I say, as strong as we are, we have to get stronger. This person came in through a lottery, and not only came in through a lottery, but you have this whole system where you can bring people with you. Chain migration, it's horrible. It's horrible. Somebody had mentioned he may have brought, and he only had a green card, but 23 people may have come in indirectly or directly through him. Now, I don't want those people in, family members, whoever they may be. I don't want them in here. You saw what he did. And you saw his evilness, because they go back to the town, or they go back to the area where he grew up, not where he's lived. Even you go back to the country, as I understand it. I mean, this is not the kind of people we want in the United States. So we have to get rid of chain migration.
I feel like ordinary Americans, every time there's another terrorist attack with a similar pathology, they start to feel helpless now that there's been tough talk for years, and yet nothing concrete they can point to that will prevent another one. I think some people are actually adjusting their expectations and thinking this is our new way of life.
I know they are, and a lot of people do that. And frankly, the Democrats have been absolutely terrible on immigration, because they want anybody to come in. You know, they obstruct, make it very tough, and they want on immigration and crime. I mean, they want people to just pour in over the borders. That's not going to happen. And we're stopping it. No, we want a merit-based system. I want people to come into our country, but it's got to be a merit-based system. And we can't take that for the norm. What you just said, we cannot just say, oh, well, it's going to happen, let's get used to it. We cannot allow it to happen. And I can tell you, the Trump administration is getting tougher and tougher and tougher. And we are now, as you know, looking at different forms of the wall. The wall's going to happen. The vetting is now at a point that it's the toughest it's ever been, and we're now going to make it even tougher. But this person, this animal that did what he did in the west side of Manhattan, we just can't allow this to continue.
Next, the effort to change our tax system when there are so many competing interests in the swamp. House Republicans have unveiled their idea for a simpler tax code that benefits the middle class. It's sure to be popular with a lot of taxpayers, but not necessarily with special interests pulling strings in Washington. And some Democrats say the plan is a giveaway to wealthy and corporate interests. I asked President Trump some tax questions I thought you might like to ask. In 2018, will I, or most Americans anyway, be able to fill out their taxes on a postcard, do you think?
Well, I do think so. I do think so. And I actually had one over here someplace, but I won't show it to you. I won't even bother.
I want to see it.
Oh, well, I don't think I have it in here now.
Do you have
It's
it?
too bad, but it's too bad. Does anybody have one? But we have literally a one-page form.
Smaller than this?
Yeah, about half the size of that. And most people will be able to do that. Most people will be able to fill out their taxes on a very small form.
You know, Democrats and Republicans have told me and others behind the scenes that almost every decision made in Washington is not really necessarily about the people. It's about the interests that are lobbying them and pressing for different measures. Who is it that's fighting for a piece of this tax reform, maybe fighting against the interests of ordinary Americans?
The swamp, Sharyl, it's the swamp. It's unbelievable. Every single deduction, everything there, people are fighting for, right or wrong. I mean, in some cases, it's a good thing that they're fighting. Other cases, everybody knows it's wrong, but they're fighting nevertheless because people benefit by it. But it's a middle-class tax cut. It's a massive tax cut. It's also reform. It's also simplification. But more than anything else, it's a tremendous tax cut that's going to be great for the middle class and great for jobs and business. And when I say great for business, I'm doing that because of jobs.
Mortgage interest deduction. After all the negotiations, do you think it stays?
Well, we're going to see. I mean, look, we will be talking about certain elements, and we're going to see. We're going through a very complicated process right now. There are many, many things such as that right now, totally up in the air. We're going to see. You know, the Senate has something to say about it, too. I can tell you this. The House has been amazing. I have watched what they've done, and we're looking to make it as final as possible. But the Senate is going to come out with their version, and then everybody's going to sit in a room, and hopefully it's going to happen. And I think it will happen because people know we're one of the highest taxed nations in the world. We're not competitive with other nations, and now we're going to be among the lower taxed nations. I'd like to say it's the lowest, but we can't get there yet. We may get there in the future.
It sounds like there are odds that even though the House has gotten their tax plan out there, maybe this doesn't go through. If the Senate fights with the House and Republicans don't all get on board.
I don't think so. I'll tell you what, I've been doing a lot of this. We've actually had a lot of bills passed despite what people think. I think I heard the number 70, and it's almost a record. And, you know, if you listen to the fake media, the fake news from some of these people like CNN, they are so false, and so many different networks. I mean, the level of false reporting to me, somebody said, what's the biggest surprise? The amount of dishonesty of the press. But if you listen to a lot of the media, you know, I didn't do well with bills passed, meaning Congress, meaning Senate and House. Well, the fact is that we're almost at the top of the pack. We have, I think it's approximately 70 bills that have been passed, and many of them very important. In addition to that, we have Justice Gorsuch, who is fantastic. We're putting in tremendous numbers of federal judges, which is the great unsung thing that we're doing. We're opening up the regulations. Now we're going for the massive tax cuts. I mean, we've done really a lot, and I'm very proud of it. We've had, I think, a great 9 months.
The current head of the IRS, John Koskinen, gave false information to Congress in the targeting of conservatives, disobeyed a federal judge's order to provide documents, presided over the IRS when subpoenaed documents were destroyed and taxpayers were hacked, awarded a lucrative contract to Equifax after the credit bureau failed to protect the credit of 145 million Americans. Why is he still the head of the IRS?
Well, a lot of people have been asking that question from long previous to me. This is taken a long time ago. We're just picking now a new head of the IRS, and he will be looking at that, I'm sure. But I have just made my decision as to who it is. It'll be announced very shortly, and I'm sure they'll be looking at that.
You can announce it now.
I could do that, exactly. Well, we'll be probably another short period of time. We'll be announcing really a terrific person will be heading up the IRS. So they'll take a look at everything.
Koskinen is retiring. Is that right? Or
well, actually, he had a term.
He had a term. Okay.
And his term ended someplace like within the last week or so, and he will leave as per the term. You know, that was not one that was under my purview. He had a term, he went up to a certain point, and then he leaves. We have a number of them. They were appointed by President Obama, but they didn't end in January, they end in a term. His term ended in October or November something, and that's when he leaves.
And coming up, many Americans are fearful. It's widely viewed as our biggest national security threat, North Korea and its nuclear ambitions. President Trump is now headed to Asia, a 5-country, 10-day tour, the longest foreign trip of his presidency so far. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster told reporters we are, quote, running out of time on North Korea. What does President Trump think? On North Korea, in a recent poll, 50% of Americans said it's somewhat likely that North Korea will use a nuclear weapon to attack America. Do you agree?
Well, I think that's a shame that it's so many. No, I don't agree. I actually don't. I hope that something's going to be worked out. If it's not, it's not. But I really do hope that something's going to be worked out. We'll see what happens. I do believe that China, where I'm going very soon, and President Xi has been working. I really feel this. He's been working very hard to see if he can do something, but we're going to see. But I think that estimate hopefully is extremely high.
Do you think there's work you can personally do on this trip that will lessen the threat?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see what happens. I can't tell you that there's not going to be something bad happening in terms of what we're going to do or maybe what they're going to do, but I can tell you that we are a very, very strong nation, getting stronger all the time, not only our economy, but our military. You see what we've done with ISIS. In 8 months, I've done more than the previous administration's done during the entire 2 terms of the administration. And we are going to have to solve problems like North Korea. North Korea is a big, big problem. Hopefully it can be worked out. Maybe it won't be able to, but hopefully it can be worked out.
Would you ever consider sitting down with the dictator? And someone mentioned to me that President Nixon went to China to meet with Mao, Reagan met with Gorbachev. Is there any parallel there? Would there be a scenario in which you could envision doing that? Well,
I'm meeting with different people from different countries. I'm meeting, as you know, China, Japan, South Korea. We're meeting with a lot of different countries. I'm going to Vietnam. I'm going to the Philippines after that for big conferences. So I'll be meeting with a lot of people. I would sit down with anybody. I don't think it's strength or weakness. I think sitting down with people is not a bad thing. So I would certainly be open to doing that, but we'll see where it goes. I think we're far too early.
I don't know how closely you're monitoring some of the military movement, but 3 U.S. aircraft carrier groups, I'm told, will be in the area of North Korea during your visit of Korea. What is North Korea's dictator to make of that? Surely that's some sort of, perhaps, message?
I don't know if it's a message. Look, we have a very, very getting stronger military. We are spending a lot of money on our military that we weren't spending over the past long period of time. It's been depleted, and now it's growing very fast. We're ordering new ships. We're ordering tremendous numbers of planes, the greatest plane in the world right now. As you know, the F-35. We're ordering tremendous numbers of fighter jets. We're ordering beautiful new equipment for the Army, for the Marines. The Air Force is really looking strong, and it really was not looking as good as it should look. No, we're putting ourselves in a position where we'll be stronger than we ever have been, ever in our history, proportionately and otherwise.
There was one more subject President Trump brought up. What was it? Find out when we come back. We learned some new inside information this week about the inner workings of the Democratic Party. In a new book, the former head of the Democratic National Committee, Donna Brazile, says Hillary Clinton's campaign, in essence, took over the political group, just like her opponent Bernie Sanders and others accused them of doing. As our time for the interview with President Trump ran out, that was one topic he wanted to address.
She just wrote a book, and that book is horrible, what they did to Bernie Sanders, and probably illegal. But what they did, what Hillary Clinton and the Clinton clan did to Bernie Sanders, honestly, when you see that book, if it's what I'm hearing and what's being reported today, it's the first time I've heard about it, It is horrible what they did to Bernie Sanders and to the Bernie Sanders people.
Are you aware of any investigations by Department of Justice of any of the Clinton entities?
I'd love to be much more involved, but I'm not supposed to be involved with Department of Justice, so I have to hope that they run themselves well. But as you know, as president, you're not supposed to be involved with the Department of Justice. A lot of people ask me that question. I give them that answer, and they say, now I understand. But they could very well be looking at it. I can say this, Bernie Sanders was treated very badly. I'm not a fan of Bernie Sanders, although we do agree with each other on trade. Trade deals are horrible that this country has made. We have horrible, horrible trade deals, and I'm renegotiating those deals. We're going to make them very good, or we're going to terminate them, frankly. NAFTA is horrible. The deal we have with South Korea is horrible. We have so many bad deals. And Bernie Sanders actually agreed with me on that one point. And I actually got a lot of Bernie Sanders voters during the election, as you possibly know better than I do. But what happened to Bernie Sanders with the DNC, spearheaded by the Clintons, and according to the new book by Donna Brazile, was horrible.
Before Brazile became chair of the Democratic National Committee, she was a CNN analyst and got caught during the 2016 campaign giving candidate Clinton advance questions prior to a CNN town hall with Bernie Sanders. She denied it at the time, but was fired and later apologized. Next week on Full Measure, President Trump will be in the Philippines, where there is one of the strangest political dynamics in the world. A leader who is tough on ISIS has advocated shooting down drug dealers and drug users in the streets, and is enjoying wild popularity